Hello and welcome to my next tutorial video. This will be another double video. I'm going to try and cover the Phototools menu and also go over some of the different things I do for the lighting in my pictures. So I'm going to start with Phototools. First, you need to go to World, Photo and Video, and Phototools. If you like shortcuts, the shortcut is Control-Alt-P. So you just click that. My settings right now are on high, not ultra. If I'm actually doing pictures, excuse me, I'll turn it up to ultra, but just for this tutorial, high should be fine. The first thing you should do is here in the wind light settings, don't change much of anything at the moment. Leave your shaders on and make sure that enable atmospheric shaders is on as well. Otherwise your wind lights won't work. Down here in the type menu, you can choose what will be affected by the wind lights, like trees and plants and the ground or avatars or everything. I just leave mine at everything by default. And the resolution ranges from decent to lifelike. If you want to use anywhere from very good to lifelike, you have to have lighting and shadows enabled, which is our next stop in the light tab. So click to enable lighting and shadows. This, depending on your graphics card, will probably slow you down a bit, but if you're like me and really only care as far as pictures goes, it really doesn't matter if you just turn it on for a session. Sun, moon, and projectors is what I use for shadow types, just because with so many different wind lights, you never know where your light source is going to be coming from, so it's good to have them all there. Enable ambient occlusion. What this does is adds more shadow so that it gives you a sense of depth to the picture, and to where you're looking. Things look even more 3D as opposed to 2D. So if you pay attention to the wall behind me, or even the curtains, I'll change the windows to closed. If you pay close attention to the windows, you'll notice a difference when I turn on ambient occlusion. So this is without ambient occlusion. This is with ambient occlusion. It is a subtle effect. You can miss it, but it's really noticeable and it's excellent for pictures. So particularly along the bottom of the glass here. I'll do it again just in case you miss it. So this is with ambient occlusion, the extra shadow. This is without. So you may actually notice it more around the blinds or even on my skin. If you look at my skin, you'll notice that there's not a ton of shadow right now. But if I turn ambient occlusion back on, it's noticeable. So play with it. Try it on and off. You might not like it. You might prefer to add shadows by hand in whatever your program is, but using this can save you a lot of time and detail that you might not want to do by hand, and it'll make your pictures look that much better. So one of the things that can be confusing about Phototools is over in the depth of field / glow menu. A few of the options here will make zero sense to you if you've never used a camera, um, a real camera, let's say a professional camera, or anything beyond just the little point and shoot digital camera, these won't make any sense to you because these are taken directly from a real world camera. So the first thing you want to do is enable depth of field. And again, if you're on ultra, this will slow you down. So you might want to think about trying to take off anything really script heavy, any HUDs, which you should be doing anyway. But also make sure that whoever you're working on isn't wearing a ton of scripts or anything like that. So as you can see, it looks a little bit blurry. That's because I've been playing with the settings already. But I'll start here. So enable your depth of field. And if you haven't bothered this before, it should look normal. Otherwise, I would turn everything except the view angle. The view angle just controls your zoom in and zoom out. Now, pay attention to me. I want you to focus on me for the rest of this tutorial, unless I tell you where else to look, because this is where the way I'm positioned makes it the best view to notice what's going on in the background. So I'll move Phototools over here. Now the FOV, that means field of view. This is let me see. It's sort of the same as, well, it is the same with a regular camera of what you're trying to focus on. So a good thing to do is play with it a bit, and you'll notice that the higher I go, the more blurry I get. So you might, if you want it high, if you really like the background blurred, then come pretty high. And let's see, let's go back to light and play with the shadow blur, which might soften it up a bit. Just play with the value a little bit. I usually don't bother too much with field of view, just because I prefer to add blur later. I like to control exactly what's blurred in the pictures. I might not want all of this decoration here in the back blurred, or I might not want these curtains blurred. So it's a lot easier to blur what I want in Photoshop, which is what I use, than to let SL blur it for me and then be stuck and I can't unblur it. You could try to sharpen it, but that would just tear up the pixels and it would look like crap. So it's pretty much up to you. But for now, I'll leave this at 24. The F number it needs a little bit of explaining. Now, this is to mimic what's called an aperture. An aperture is basically the size of the lens opening on a camera. And it's kind of backwards. You change it if you like to manually shoot real life pictures. You change it depending on how much light you want to get in the picture. Now, it is a part of a triangle with exposure and your shutter speed and ISO and things like that. But just for the purposes now, all we care about is aperture. So one thing to remember is that the larger the size of the lens opening, aperture, learn that word, the larger the aperture, the more light comes in, which means you want a small number, which says F number here. that means you want a smaller number, okay? The smaller the aperture, the less light comes in. That means you want a large f number. So if you, it may be a bit hard to tell the difference from this angle, but I'll zoom in slightly. Let's control 0 and zoom in a bit. Now, pay particular attention to my outline and the background here. Maybe the curtains. The curtains is a good spot because it's got different things going on here. So pay attention to the curtains as I adjust the f number. Now, I'm also going to change the focal length because this plays in the aperture as well. This is the same as lens length in real life. In real life, you sort of have to play around with the lens length and the aperture to get a quality picture. So, focal length, pay attention to the curtain again. Do you see how it's blurring? Have a look at my hair now. The higher the focal length that I'm starting out with, my hair is starting to blur. So I'm going to push it up. And this will slow you down a bit. Be patient with me. I'm just going to push it all the way up as far as I can go without crashing so you can see sort of how it works. And if you're also trying to play with this and sort of teach yourself what the controls do, as you adjust your focal length, I would play with the f number, aperture, a little bit. Move it up or down. See if you can get a nice blur effect that you want. Usually, if you don't want to play with blur in processing, or if you're just taking a straight snapshot and sorry about that, and don't want to edit, this is a good trick to have. So I'm going to bring my focal length back down so I can actually work again and do stuff. And I have messages pop up on the computer. This is also another reason to close other windows on your computer while you're taking pictures, because you'll freeze up probably. All right, looks like we're working again. So now we'll move on to focal time. Focal time, sort of in a real camera, that's controlled by the lens and the aperture as well. It basically it shows how long it takes to focus on an object, say between the background and me. So I would advise you to play with this as well. This whole thing is basically, think of it as you having a professional camera in real life and having a professional photo session. You should be, but you should be at least experimenting with the manual button and controlling your own settings. And believe me, you have to experiment with those just like you do here in SL. If you have, if you move from one place to a few steps away, the light could change completely, and you might have to readjust everything, your aperture, your shutter speed, everything. So it's worthwhile to play with this and get familiar with it. So the next one is the circle of confusion, and what this does is this determines how much blur you have, and it doesn't affect your depth of field at all. The depth of field is already set earlier where you set it, but it does change what shows, how much detail shows outside of the blur. So mine is pushed all the way up. I'm going to bring it down if it's cooperative. Here we go. So that was a noticeable difference between those two bits of movement. So you can see the difference. And I'll also bring this down, and I'll adjust my field of view, which kind of a good idea to keep this low. I try to keep it anywhere between 4 and 5. And play with the view angle as well. This is also helpful depending on what size of shot that you want to get. Okay, so bringing my aperture, it will say f number, but please get familiar with the term aperture. It's just better form to me. I don't know. It's a thing. So play around with your f number. Once you what I like to do is sort of mess with the blur first and then mess with the aperture after to sort of see how good of a look I can get with the blur. And if I turn to the side slightly, you can see that everything in the background is blurred. I'll even open the windows again. Let's turn it to glass. I'll open the windows again, and you see how everything outside is blurred. I'm a little blurred at the moment, but I'm not being super picky at the moment. Resolution is, it basically is how good it is at simulating the depth of field. You don't have to worry about it on a normal basis. I don't. For if you're shooting at ultra and doing a shoot, you should probably bump it all the way up to 1. It will slow you down, but by this point you should already have everything laggy off and put away. So it shouldn't add that much more of a difference. So yeah, play around with it, and this is the end of part 1 of the tutorial. The next part will be lighting. I'll go over wind lights, give a little bit of info about them, my favorite ones, what I use, and how I tweak them and add to them to get certain effects with pictures. So sit tight.